Hello, Professor Downs. Today my presentation is on reproductive justice, focusing on why was Roe v. Wade considered a large step for women's reproductive rights. In America today, women's right to abortion is either legal or being debated in the state court. Abortion is at the forefront of social media and news outlets, it seems, but this is not the first time it has been brought to light. Roe v. Wade was a 1973 Texas court case that fought for a woman's right to have an abortion. Roe's lawyers argued the Texas law that banned the procedure was a violation of Jane Roe's right to privacy. Eventually, the Texas law was determined unconstitutional, and a woman's right to abortion was granted. Although the win came with several regulations, it is still considered a big step in the reproductive justice movement. But why? So the first cause is it set precedents for other cases. Only 3 years after the case, the Supreme Court ruled it unlawful for the state of Missouri to require a husband's approval before his wife has an abortion. In addition to that, in 1976, the first marital rape law is enacted in Nebraska, essentially meaning that although you're married to your husband or your wife, you cannot force them to have sex with you. And that was really important as far as reproductive justice because, as I mentioned in the previous paper that we wrote, reproductive justice is like a large umbrella. It covers a broad spectrum of so many things. So the fact that it kind of laid down the foundation for other people to come and say, hey, this is my right, as you know, I have self-autonomy, this is my personal right, that I don't need my husband's approval if I need an abortion, or, my husband doesn't, I don't want to have sex with my husband, but he doesn't have to force me anymore. So that is the first cause that it really laid a foundation for other people to bring more things to light. Cause number 2. Abortion was, in many ways, is a taboo topic. In the 1970s, abortion was not openly discussed, and neither was sex education. Some argue that the case made state representatives realize the importance of educating teens about STDs and unwanted pregnancies. Only 4 years after the court ruling, Title X was amended. So Title X is providing funding for family planning and health screening services, and especially focused on preventing unwanted pregnancies and STDs in teens. And Title X is still around today. Human and Health Services has a great website that if anyone ever wants to learn about Title X and the grants and everything, it's set up in a very clear and easy way to understand. But you can argue that if it weren't for the court case, Title X would not have been amended, because it, as I said, abortion was a taboo topic before, and in the 1970s, we were still coming out of the, kind of conservative way of thinking from the 50s and 60s. So it made the government kind of realize that, reproductive rights and things like this are being made important and being put in mainstream media. So that is one of the reasons behind the cause. So cause number 3, the court case could be considered a large step in reproductive rights because it lowered the risk of death in at-home abortions. According to Guttmacher Institute, the rate of at-home abortions in the 1950s and 60s was an estimated 200,000 to 1.2 million. This is a very significant number, and each of those put the mother at a high risk of death. Now the death rate for abortions today is 0.0 per 100,000 procedures. Women are not, in most cases, forced to nearly kill themselves to perform an operation they feel is necessary. So this is the cause that is extremely significant, in my opinion. Because before abortion was legal, if women wanted to have an abortion, they would have to find someone who was either not experienced enough, or even a doctor, really, to have the procedure performed. And even if they did find a doctor, there was always the risk of putting that doctor in danger, or being arrested for even having an abortion. And if you did go through the abortion, everything was okay, the abortions were extremely expensive. So a lot of women did not have the opportunity to have an abortion performed by someone else, so they would do it themselves. And so many women would die from what we call coat hanger abortions, which is really sad. But now women, have a right to have an abortion, so they can go to a clinic and have it done the proper way without having to put themselves or another person in danger. And the 0.6 per 100,000 procedures, those are very rare, and only 0.05% of women experience complications after procedures. So it's a very common procedure done in the United States, and the odds are pretty good when you do have an abortion. Some may argue that Roe v. Wade was not significant because it slandered the idea of reproductive justice, given the idea that women seeking abortions are sexually promiscuous. They may also argue that it portrayed abortion as a viable means of contraception for young girls. It also arouses disapproval regarding religion and people's beliefs. So I'm going to be going into breaking down the counter arguments now. So Roe v. Wade, as I previously mentioned, is said to have slandered the idea of reproductive justice because it made women seeking abortions seem sexually promiscuous. This can also go hand in hand with people claiming it portrayed abortion as a viable means of contraception for young women. So, the average cost of an abortion today is around $800. Despite the court case, it is difficult to find a doctor who would perform the procedure, and if you were lucky enough to find one, it was expensive. Most insurance companies do not cover the cost of an abortion, so patients have no other choice but to pay out of pocket. So condoms and birth control are much cheaper and easier for girls if they're concerned about pregnancy. So, same thing with the abortion pill. It can be hundreds of dollars as well. And looking at statistics being done in the CDC and by the Guttmacher Institute, 60% of women having abortions are in their 20s. So they're young, they're not these established young women. They don't have a lot of money. So going into that, women who undergo procedures are not to be sexually promiscuous. According to Guttmacher Institute, in 2004, approximately 8% of women had an abortion due to medical reasons for the mother or the fetus. Even more surprising is 25% of abortions that same year were because the mother could not afford to raise a child, and 19% of abortions were by women who already have children and cannot care for another. Sticking a stigma to women who have abortions is not fair if you are taking into account the facts. In a more recent study, 75% of women chose to have an abortion because they were economically challenged. There are reasons why women choose this route. It is more than because they're sexually promiscuous. I'm sorry, that's a typo. And even then, we cannot judge a woman who owns her personal sexuality, but that is for another day. Personal sexuality and taking charge of that is a whole other topic. But going back to the statistics, like I said, 60% of women having abortions are in their 20s. 86% of them are married, and even 62% are religiously having a religious affiliation. So there's just a lot of women who are kind of in the same boat with a lot of things. And going back to the fact that 25% of abortions in 2004 because the mother could not afford to raise a child, and now it's increased to 75%. I think that people need to stop focusing. My personal opinion is that people need to stop focusing on abortions and focus more on, okay, a lot of these women, 75% of them are having abortions because they're economically challenged, and it's extremely expensive to raise a child. So it's not because they're, sexually promiscuous and just want to go and, have sex and not pay the consequences. Really, it's because, it's an accidental pregnancy, an unwanted pregnancy, and they possibly have considered, caring for this child, but they come to the realization that they cannot afford it because it's expensive. So every year there is an increase in awareness of the lack of reproductive rights because women have been fighting for healthcare for decades. The Roe v. Wade case was decades ago, but there's still an argument over whether it should have been made legal or not. Regardless, the question of how influential the case is up to you to decide. This is my works cited. And that is all. Thank you for watching.